Alright, so back here on the 1978 Toyota pickup. Notice I'm outside, not in the shop. Did a bunch of cleaning. I had so much crap just laying around, getting in the way and annoying the hell out of me. So I'm going to make another run over to the scrap yard. I thought about trying to sell that cross member, but like it's so beat up and old and worn out. All the bushes, the springs, the shocks, like there might be a couple of pieces of metal somebody had used, but the rotors, the calipers, there ain't hardly anything useful on that. So I ain't gonna try to sell it. And then yeah, I got a bunch of other just random crap that was taking up space. You can see that flywheel there. That's the one that actually came out of the engine that I got. Damn thing looks like it came out the bottom of the Titanic. It looks real bad. So oh well, I was gonna replace it anyway. So cleaning up all that mess in my junk pile over there, all tidied up, which is good. Found a big old toad over in here, which was hilarious. Living in a desert and don't hardly expect to see a toad. Got my wheels out there just to get out of the way, so it's nice to have a clean shop. Makes working a lot nicer. Had a oil spill and everything, cleaned all that up. Just threw some dirt on it and then scraped it off. So all right, so what I did here, so all of the cab mounts were pretty well rotted out. I mean, obviously, you're not going to be replacing, all that crap in there and then having this metal down here all tidy and perfect. It definitely was not. So it was pretty well pitted and nasty. If we look back over here on these rear ones that are in good condition, so there's the mount that comes off the frame, and then they just sort of spot welded these big old washers on here, and then it's got like some sort of centering hole whatever thing. And so on all of the other mounts, this ring was completely rotted to nothing. The front ones, it was totally gone. And then these middle ones here, it had rings on it, but they were completely wasted. So a little bit of chisel, air hammer, die grinder, whatever, got them off of here. And then so I just made plates to put on all the corners. Now you notice I didn't seam weld all the way around it. So I painted the bottom frame piece and then painted the back side of this little plate. And I didn't want to get a whole bunch of heat in here. So if I seam welded this whole thing, this sucker got red hot. Even if I threw some air on it or something to try to cool it down, it would have done nothing. And then the paint would have just boiled underneath there. And so by just throwing a tack on each corner, I kept the temperature down. And the cab's going to sit up on top of that. It's going to have a bolt in place. This ain't going to go anywhere. And like I said, the ones that I took off that are these rings, there were just like a couple of spot welds holding it down. That's not seam welded either. So I'm not too worried that that's going to shift around or do anything. So this should be fine. And like I said, I was able to keep the heat off of it, so the paint, it should be fine in between those layers. I didn't paint the bottom side or this top side because I got all this other paint and crap that I got to get off of the frame. So I'll get to that. Now, because it's laminated, even with the paint in between, you're going to get water and stuff in those corners. And so I'll seam seal around this whenever I'm ready to prep and do the frame in the right way. So yeah, I got all plates on all the ones that were rotted out. So the back two were fine, totally not rotted. Even these little rubber pieces in both of the corners were totally fine. But yeah, the rest of them were completely wasted. And so I replaced all of those. And so now I'm trying to make some temporary mounts, the rubber bits that they hold into, And so I'm just going to make some temporary ones, just to have something in place. I ordered, some offline, but they didn't have any for my truck. And so I ordered a later model one, and we'll see. But in the meantime, I'm just going to make some out of this. I got this horse mat that the previous owner had horses, and so I just put it in front of stuff, and I've just been slowly cutting bits off of it as I need, which is hilarious to be just cutting these things up. But I'm just going to cut a couple of squares out of this and then use that as some temporary ones, and so that's what I'll do here. So they're 2.5 by 2.5 square, and so they don't need to be perfect. These are going to be temporary anyhow, so now getting the first pass on here, it's like it doesn't even do anything at all, because this stuff is super thick. But once you score it a couple times, you can take it and bend it back and get some tension on that seam, and then it cuts not too bad. But if you just keep sitting there chopping at it with no tension on the seam, you'll be here all day trying to work your way through this stuff, because it's pretty gnarly. And honestly, I think that you probably could do permanent, because this stuff is beefy. Like, it's like 3/4 inch thick. And it's meant to be in a horse stall, so it's not like it can't go outside. So if I didn't order any, I think I probably could have just used this anyhow. Alright, so got to measure this up. It doesn't need to be perfect, because these are just temporary. But I'll use the bandsaw, cut the rest of it. It's a little bit easier. Cutting the smaller pieces, you can just bend it outward and it helps cut it a lot better. those, and then we need to get holes in them. I thought about like heating up a piece of tubing or something and like, you know, doing something crazy and melting holes into it, but you know, hole saw is obviously the smarter way to go. Like it's pretty good hole through it. And with the hole saw, there's always the piece left over on the inside, and if you tried to do another one right after the first one, it would try to push this piece further in, and then as this gets hot, it'd melt in there and you'd have a bad day. So it's a bit tedious, but you know, you take it out each time. So that's my mess of mounts. So I measured the old one and it was 1.5 inches, and so that's where I'm going to start anyway. This stuff's 3/4, which works out just fine. And you notice I didn't obsess over getting everything centered and perfect, because these are temporary. Alright, so that's where those are going to set. Now, I didn't mount the lower control arms, or uppers or spindles or any of that stuff, because I still got a bunch of mess to make, and the ball joint covers that I have don't fit, so I had to get new ball joint covers. And then, you know, the strut is open, and so I didn't want to have like me grinding and welding and doing all kinds of other stuff and then get gunk all up in the brand new bushes and ball joints and inside of the, you know, strut and all that other stuff. So you know, it'd be nice to have this on wheels and tires, but you know, I just didn't want to get all that other stuff messed up. The other part of that is I'd have to have the rack on there in order to make sure the left and the right wheels are talking the same language. Otherwise, you get to moving this thing around and they get all going wherever they feel like they're going. So I'm just on a dolly with a couple of pieces of wood to get it kind of level-ish. It's not perfect where it's setting right now, but it's good enough. So I'm going to see if I can drop this down on here and get those mounts lined up. And then I might need to, you know, shim and do some other stuff. So, you know, I'd replaced all of those panels and mounts. And, you know, I had to cut big old chunks out that had nothing previously. So, like, you know, are all of these at exactly the same height? And are they equal to whatever was there previously from the factory? The answer to that is hell no. Like, it's not even close. I got to looking at this one, and it is quite a lot, like, further up into the body than the passenger side. So, you know, I'm going to get stuff sort of ish okay. You know, what I fortunately have is I hadn't touched the bed at all. Like, haven't even, you know, done anything to any of the hardware on the bed. And so if I get this lower body line here matched up and the gap there matched up okay, and then get everything where it's supposed to be, then at least I'll know that this piece was exactly where it was previously. And if I can get the front lined up with the back, then I should be in the ballpark. But yeah, I mean, I do have some slop in the holes and everything, and you know where I'm going to end up drilling. I'm obviously not going to drill it exactly perfectly the size of the bolt I'm going to use, and so I should have a little bit of wiggle room after I'm done. And then you know, one other thing, that if you did want to use you know, the horse mat or whatever for a permanent bushing, just make sure you sleeve it, because you wouldn't want to just throw a nut and a bolt through that. and smush it down. You definitely want to sleeve it, and get like a piece of tube or something on the inside there, a little bit smaller. So when you sleeve something that's rubber, you do want the rubber to compress. And so if you did sleeve this and you end up using it, obviously your hole that you drill for everything, or you use a washer or whatever, you just need to make sure that the sleeve doesn't come through the hole, and then make sure the sleeve is a little bit shorter than whatever your rubber material is, so then it's actually under compression. But you wouldn't want to leave it like that, like just have a random bolt sticking through there. So all right, let's see if we can line this up. Might be a bit of faff because I've moved this around so many times, but let's see. Since this cab is so light, the lift takes forever, which is annoying. Looks like I'm going to squish my stool. One thing I noticed is the bed, it's got a bulge in the back of it, like a pot belly in the middle. So I'm sure when I take that apart, I'm going to have some horrible mess under there, which that ain't nothing new. At this point, I've kind of given up on anything being nice on this thing. Everything is rotted and terrible. Looks like that bed maybe needs to go towards the passenger side. Sure do. Alright, so you can see that body line there. You know, that's pretty good right there, maybe just a touch high. And so I'd have to lower that a little bit. And then gap wise, you could also see here, you know, that have to go down a little bit further than where it is now because those don't line up. And so, you know, whatever I figure out, I'm going to have to make sure that gets a little bit lower. I'll have to check up underneath there for some interference to make sure that, you know, I don't have something hitting metal on metal or whatever on that side. And so it's a little bit high, and then gap wise it's a little bit wider on the bottom than it is on the top, you know, just by a smidge. If I get my thumb in there, I'd say it's probably like a 1/4 inch or so off, and so it's sort of tilting back a little bit, and so need to figure that out. But yeah, I mean, the mounts are touching on this side, and so the front is good. You'll notice that I cut some relief for the suspension, and so, you know, I'll have to end up trimming all that stuff out, but I'm trying to get a sense for where the body's going to set and then come on this side. So you can see here, you know, that's pretty good level across there as well. But the gap on this side is a lot bigger than it was on the driver's side, and so the whole thing sort of twisted a little bit. So, you know, the nose of the truck needs to come this way in order to close that down. But you can see through the middle there, you know, that bed is touching up against the rear of the cab, and so I'm probably going to have to take this box off and all the other crap out of the bed and get up inside of that thing to see what in the world's going on to get that bubbling out the way it is. I mean, I already know what the answer is. It's going to be a bunch of damn rust. It's like everything on this old piece of crap. So, yeah, so this is hopefully close to where it's going to look. Yeah, it's looking, you know, this is probably also about ride height, based on, like, you know, where the cross member's setting and everything. It's all leveled. Actually, I take that back. This ain't ride height. I'm still got a big old gap in the back, but it actually means this sucker's going to be slammed even more than it is, which is dope. That's going to look good. All right, cool. Well, I got, you know, a bunch of more work to do. I'll fiddle around with getting this centered up a little bit more, but I think the next thing I got to do is figure out that damn bubble in the bed, because it's probably going to make it impossible for me to align this cab on here with that pushing up against it. So, all right, thanks. See you in the next one.